Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We are here for Tech Talks and More. We have a very special presentation today. My name is Alex Campbell, and today we're going to be talking about returning to school during the pandemic, social emotional learning for students. We know that it's been very tough during this pandemic, and we know that there is a lot of anxiety returning to school. So we definitely wanted to address that. And today I will be co-presenting. My name again is Alex Campbell, and my co-presenter is Raymond. Raymond, you like
to? Hello, I'm Raymond Cole, and I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here today to talk to you about this very important topic. We're going to be talking about social emotional learning that happens at the school and how you can help support that at home. This is for you, so please, when you have questions, please ask them. I'm here for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Raymond. So parents, we're ready to begin. Let's go on to the next slide. Vilma, we don't hear anything.
To listen to this presentation, once again, thank you for joining us. During today's session, I'd like to inform you that we will be presenting in English. We also have simultaneous translation in Spanish. To listen to this presentation in English or in Spanish, please click on the globe icon at the bottom of the screen. You will select the language of preference for you. You will engage and listen to the presentation in the language you select. Una vez más, muchas gracias por conectar hoy con nosotros. Quería informarles que durante nuestra sesión tendremos interpretación simultánea en español. Esta sesión se presentará en inglés. Usted puede escoger el lenguaje de su preferencia. Haga clic en el símbolo del mundo en la parte inferior de su pantalla. Seleccione el idioma que le gustaría escuchar. Participará y escuchará la presentación en el idioma que seleccione. Next. For today's presentation, we will all be participating in the Zoom webinar session. During the presentation, you can ask questions of our panelists. We will also have a short Q&A as time permits at the end of the session. If you look at the bottom of your screen, there is a Q&A icon. You can pose your questions there and then wait for an answer. Again, we will also be responding to some of the questions as time permits at the end of the session.
Again, welcome to our webinar today. My name is Raymond Cole, and I am the Systems of Support Advisor for Local District Central. One of the things that we do in our schools is we try to make sure that we foster well-being of the school community. So each day we have a specific topic. Next slide, please. Today being Wednesday, it is Wellness Wednesday. So I'd like to ask all of you to think about what you think of when you hear the word wellness. It could be something emotional, it could be physical wellness, it could be spiritual or environmental wellness. Alex, what do you think of when you think of wellness?
Thank you for asking, Raymond. When I think of wellness, I actually think of exercising. Getting an opportunity to take care of my body, eating right. Those are the two things that come to mind when I think of wellness.
That's great. So if everybody would like to take a moment and put something in the chat that you think of, if you would like to, so we have an idea of what you think of when you think of wellness. Okay. Oh, I see. Mental well-being. Yes, absolutely. And that's a part of what we're going to be talking about today.
We also have, yes, tranquility, my health, mental health and well-being, physical health.
That's great. I think it's so important for us to think about our health every day. And as Alex was saying, things that we can do to ensure our health, such as eating good food and exercising. Let's go to the next slide, please. Our objectives for today, we're going to start by looking at trauma. There's many things you might think of when you hear the word trauma, and certainly over the last year and a half with the pandemic, there's a lot of experiences that all of us have had that are traumatic. So we're going to start by looking at trauma and what trauma can be and how it can affect us and our children. Then we'll be looking at social emotional learning and restorative practices in our schools and how you can support these practices at home. And last, and probably the most important, we're going to have time to reflect on this presentation and ask questions. Next slide, please. Trauma. So again, I'm going to ask you, what do you think of when you hear the word trauma? Alex, would you like to share again?
Yes, thank you, Raymond. I've been very fortunate with my family that during this time when so many people have been affected by this horrible disease, that it hasn't affected my family, my immediate family. However, I do have kids, and I can tell you, with all of the people in our society, in our country, in the world, and all the numbers of the cases of the people getting sick, and it's reported on the news, it's reported on social media. My kids have actually become very worried and very scared about contracting the illness, or about us, meaning their parents, contracting the illness. So that is definitely something that has been on our minds collectively as a family, and how to help them with the fear that they have during this time, although that we haven't been affected directly.
Thank you for sharing that, Alex. And I think as we go through today's presentation, we're going to be talking more about how to be there for your children and for other people in your family so that we can work through trauma. And I don't see any other responses right now, so I think we'll move on to the next slide, please. Often when we think of trauma, we think of what's defined as big T trauma. That means extraordinary or really big events that might happen in somebody's life. So often we think of a death in the family, things of that nature. And that's usually what people define as trauma. However, next slide, please. There are also other types of trauma, what we refer to as small t traumas. These traumas may not be life-threatening, however, they're events that exceed our capacity to cope, and they cause us to have emotional dysfunction or feelings about them. An example of this might be if I were a child, or actually as an adult, if my dog were to run away, that would be a trauma to me. And it might not be a big trauma because maybe my dog would return. However, it still would make me afraid the next time I took my dog out. And the thing with trauma is that we want to help children and adults talk about their trauma and work through it. because if we don't, sometimes trauma can last a lifetime and affect how we respond in different situations. And small traumas can have what we call an accumulative effect. That means they can build up. So we may think that it's a small thing, but if we have several of these in a row, it may cause more emotional problems for us. And something I'd like to point out too is that as adults, something that we may not see as trauma could be trauma for our children. So that's why it's very important to be aware and to listen to how they feel. Next slide, please. In our schools, we strive to be what's called trauma informed. And one of the most important things about being trauma informed is that we ask non-judgmental questions of our students. And what we try to do is understand how they are feeling, understand what their actions are. I once heard it presented as being being an emotional scientist. So investigating emotions instead of blaming somebody for something. So very commonly we say that instead of asking questions like, what's wrong with you, when a student does something that's not appropriate in the classroom, we would prefer asking questions like, what happened to you? Or what were you thinking when you did that? That allows the student the opportunity to explain his or her actions and for us to better understand what's going on with the student and how we can help them. Next slide, please. Now, sometimes people say, well, why do we spend time on social emotional learning in schools? I thought we only learned to read and write and do math. Well, this is an example of why we do this. In this study, they looked at 213 schools that were using a social emotional learning program. And in addition to finding that the students had improvement in social and emotional skills, their attitudes, their behaviors, they also had improvement in their academic performance, an 11% improvement in academic performance. So social emotional learning, I like to think of as setting a foundation to all other types of learning. If we think about it, when we are really paying attention and learning things is when we feel safe and comfortable. And that's a part of social emotional learning. Next slide, please. In Los Angeles Unified School District, we have 4 competencies or components to social emotional learning. I always like to think of the first one, growth mindset, as the most important one. The idea of growth mindset is simply that we are not stuck in one place. We can grow, we can learn, we can change. And why this is so important is because it's if a student or your child does something and acts in a certain way, if we approach them with a growth mindset, we're thinking to ourselves, how can I help you do it differently? And so that's why it's so important. It allows the opportunity for growth, for change, and for improvement. Number 3, self-management. This is also very important because as we know, our children are going to grow up and one day they'll be living somewhere else having relationships and friendships with all kinds of different people. And we want them to be able to manage their own emotions so they can interact and have very successful relationships. This is also very important when it comes to work relationships. Social awareness, too, is a component of social emotional learning. And this is being aware of other people, how they feel, and understanding their perspective and realizing that our perspective is not the only one. Next slide, please. LAUSD has a website, and I believe it's going to be put into the chat now, the link. And on this website, it's called Social Emotional Learning. And you can see that there's a tab there for parents, where parents can get resources on a variety of things. And some of these things are very helpful for how to communicate better with your children. And it's always good to look at other people's ideas and, again, have a growth mindset. Next slide, please. So we're going to continue on now before we start talking about some ideas of what we do in schools and how to work with your children at home. We're going to talk a little bit about mindfulness. Mindfulness can be a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Some people meditate, and that's part of their mindfulness. But the most important thing, I think, for our work today with mindfulness is to be present in the here and now. And when I think about that, I think about times where I'm talking to my wife and she's telling me something, and all of a sudden I realize I didn't hear what she said because I'm not present in the here and now. And so what I'll do is I'll stop and I'll tell her how important it is what she's saying and how interested I am. And I apologize and say, I'm not sure what you said. Could you please repeat it? And we can do the same thing with our children. But hopefully, for me and the rest of us, we will try to be in the here and now so we can focus on what they say. And for mindfulness, sometimes that just means taking a deep breath through our nose and then letting it out through our mouths and slowing ourselves down, because often we rush from place to place. Next slide, please. Active listening. I like to talk about active listening after mindfulness because, again, I feel that mindfulness sets a foundation for active listening. We need to be in the here and now. We need to be present to do active listening. So when you are talking with your children, give your full attention to your child. And I know this isn't always easy. We have so many things going on. Often the TV is on, the dog may be barking, we're focused on making dinner or doing something for work. But it's important to take some time during the day and just focus on your children. So stop the other things you're doing and listen. And then ask questions to better understand. A lot of times somebody will say something and we might think we understand what they say, but maybe we don't. So if you're not sure, ask questions. And use statements where you are repeating what they say and saying, This is what I heard you say. And then ask, did I get that right? Did I miss anything? It gives your child the opportunity to clarify anything, and it helps to improve your communication. You might also ask them to repeat what you said, so the communication is going back and forth. Next slide, please. So here are some questions that might help you engage your child. I often hear people say, when my child comes home from school, I say, how was school? They say, fine, or okay. What did you learn today? Nothing. Children and adults often get into a pattern of using one-word answers. But if we use open-ended questions and follow-up questions, that can help us get to more information and start to understand more of what's happening with our children. Now, I feel personally from my own experience that this is really important as our children grow up, as they go through middle school and high school, continuing to ask questions, being involved with their lives. And again, if we think back to a few slides back, when we were talking about trauma-informed schools, and we think about the idea of those questions being non-judgmental. So our goal is not to pick apart or criticize, it's to better understand. And there should be a link put in the chat right now for our current newsletter from the historic Central Avenue Community of Schools. And in there, there's an article about asking engaging questions of your children, and some of these questions are there. So looking at the questions, we could say things like, who did you have lunch with today? What was something that made you laugh today? What was the best part of your day? Really? Why was that the best part? What is your goal for school this week? How can I help? Or would you like my help? What did you learn today that surprised you? And don't be afraid to tell your children things about your day, because they probably are very interested to know how your day went and what's new with you. Next slide, please. One of the programs that we use in Los Angeles Unified is called Second Step. I've actually been using Second Step for 30 years now. It's a wonderful program that helps students understand each other better and do problem solving when there are conflicts. Here are some of the units in Second Step. The first unit is about growth mindset and goal setting. Again, that's just what we were talking about. Having a growth mindset, realizing that we can change, we can grow, we can learn. And one of the ways that we do this is by setting goals, having things we want to achieve. The second unit is for emotional management, better understanding emotions and feelings and how to deal with them. Often when things happen to me as an adult and I feel emotions inside, strong feelings, maybe I'm even angry, I think to myself, did that person really mean that the way I took it? And I try to slow myself down, use my mindfulness, and reflect on it before I respond. The third section or third unit is on empathy and kindness. So understanding others better and how to be kind. And the fourth one is, again, problem solving. Next slide, please. So second step has components for parents. And there should be another link going into the chat about that. And we're going to take a look at some of the components for parents. Next slide, please. I think that this is really important because some of the components deal with things like privacy and independence, responsibility, and the one we're going to talk about today is communication. Next slide, please. This is a resource on second step called Parentine. Next slide, please. And at the top, you can click so that it is in English or Spanish. Next slide, please. And we're going to take a look at a video now. And in this video, we have the opportunity to hear from children or students about communication and their parents and see different perspectives and how they can improve communication. If you could please play the video.
Like things I could do is like whenever like they make a decision or they like tell us something, like I could just like go along with it because they think if they think that's what's best for us, then I should agree instead of arguing with them on why I think it's a bad idea.
I routinely tell him that I make mistakes all the time, and I think that that helps with our relationship because when you feel like somebody never messes up or they never acknowledge that they've done wrong, it's hard to kind of relate to them or feel close to them. So I feel like Ethan and I are able to talk about, you know, those types of things, and it creates a closeness that's natural, it's not forced.
I think just things that we could do as a family that make us get along better would probably be just spending more time with each other. We have really busy days. We're gone for long periods of time without seeing each other. So we kind of like lose appreciation for each other.
But it's really important to me. It always has been, but now more than ever, that I'm really present when when we are together.
Yeah, I think it's important to, be good in school and like be smart, but I also want to have a social life. So I really want like that balance, and I want to I think I'm young and like right now I don't have responsibility, so I should be able to like go out and stuff. But rather than going out, I'm out my home like studying. Okay, if I were to do good in school, you will let me go out like once a week or something like that.
I guess to make things better, just kind of put down a general set of guidelines for the things that we fight about more, so we stop fighting about them.
We're going through a major remodel. I wish I had more time to spend with my kids just so I could draw that process out and teach them what I'm doing, as opposed to just getting it done.
Doing the laundry and doing the dishes and cleaning my room before they even say it. So I can go outside more and I could play more with my friends.
Some things that I can do to help us get along would be talk to her and explain to her how I'm feeling.
I need to slow down sometimes and just be present in the moment and let him tell me about his day, or let him tell me what he's feeling or how he's thinking, or tell me a story, what happened, so that I can hear him.
Next slide, please. Before I go on, one of the things that I forgot to mention is that second step is a program for kindergarten through 8th grade. We'll be talking a little bit more about restorative practices, which also are for those grades, but go into higher grades. There's also a lot of social emotional learning lessons for secondary, for middle school, and for high school that are often done during advisory classes. Another program that's offered through second step is called the Imagine Neighborhood. And when I was exploring this and thinking about it, I really liked it because it's a podcast, so you are listening And as you can see from this picture, the adult is listening with the child. And there's stories about imagining different things happening and how to deal with feelings and emotions. And I think that it's a really great program to start conversations with your children, and a great thing to share with them. And I also saw that people were asking about, is there going to be time to ask questions? And yes, I definitely want to have time to ask and answer questions and have a discussion. Next slide, please. This is another program from Second Step called Captain Compassion. And I should have mentioned, I didn't mention this, but these programs are available to you as parents without having an account for Second Step. You can just click on them. The parts for Second Step in the classroom, the school district has bought that for all Los Angeles Unified School District teachers. Captain Compassion is a program that looks at bullying and how to stand up for yourself and how to stand up for others and be supportive of other people when they're being picked on. Next slide, please. So another component to social emotional learning is called restorative justice or restorative practices. Restorative justice is something that was started, I think, a little bit over 10 years ago in our school district. And the idea was that instead of having things like suspensions for students who weren't behaving, having ways of helping the students take responsibility for their actions, better understanding what they did, and making amends to other people. In other words, saying they were sorry and changing their actions. Again, restorative justice is often used by asking questions like, what were you thinking when you were doing this? What do you think the other person felt when you did that? So it's a way of building the ability of the students to start thinking for themselves, to problem solve, rather than just say, don't do this. Now, in recent years, we've moved away from restorative justice towards something more foundational called restorative practices. Restorative practices, the idea is to build more of a community so each student feels a sense of belonging, that that the school is part of their home, and they belong there. And the idea is the more connected they feel to the school, to other students there, the less likely they are to do things that might harm the relationships with other people there. So through restorative practices, we have what's called community building circles. And the students would sit in a circle and they would be asked simple questions. Sometimes it would start out with, just things like, what's your favorite animal? And the idea is that we're getting to know each other better. We're starting to share things. We're finding out that my favorite animal, the wolf, is this person's favorite animal too. We have connections. So community building circles build that sense of belonging. They help to heal trauma, and they encourage peace. Next slide, please. Circles often start with a check-in, and the check-in can be something as simple as, how is your day going so far? How do you feel today? If you were thinking about the weather, what would you say your feelings are today? Is it sunny? Is it cloudy? Is it rainy? And so very simple questions. These questions help to, again, bring people to the here and now, help the students think about how they feel, what's going on inside, slowing them down a little bit, focusing them. It also helps the teacher better understand if there's something major going on with a student that needs to be addressed. And these same things can be used at home. Next slide, please. So we're going to take a look at a video, and it's very important when this video starts to make it larger, otherwise it'll be very small. And this is of a circle. This is more of a restorative justice circle, but it gives you an idea of what restorative circles are about.
First, I'm going to read a quote. To succeed, you must first improve. To improve, you must first practice. Young people have to be given space to grow and to feel like, okay, I made a mistake, but from this learning experience, I can continue to become better. To learn, you must first fail.
When you're talking about student discipline, a lot of times we are punitive because it's faster and restorative takes more time. But restorative practices are better long-term. So at Procone, we have a place called The Zone, which we use in lieu of suspension.
Welcome to The Zone.
It's a collaborative space where kids get into a circle and they discuss what their behaviors were and ways to correct it.
We have The Zone every morning from 7 to 9 a.m. Today, we had 8 students in The Zone. We're here today to talk about how to make things right when we make mistakes, poor choices. Usually the infractions are cell phone use, disrespect, cursing, but it could also be that there was an argument in a classroom or more aggressive behaviors that also get sent to us. So even though you had a conflict that brought you here, if we can bring our best selves to this circle, we can get a lot done, we can learn from each other. When students come in, we go over circle guidelines so that there are agreements that we hold within this space. What does it mean to listen from the heart?
You're trying to feel like you're relating to the situation.
Just like showing respect to them.
Once we teach them really what the zone is and how this is not a space where there's a power dynamic between you and another person, then they kind of disarm and we get to what's causing that behavior.
I had somebody come to me and tell me that a friend said something bad about me.
Most of the time when you're in trouble, you get a referral and you have a consequence. They don't really want to hear your side of the story.
Well, what happened?
When you come into Zone, they have a conversation with you and they kind of tell you how to solve your problem the positive way.
I was able to go to her and like work it out.
We're really just trying to get context. Whenever there's a conflict, right, both parties contribute to the conflict. Right? Although you may not feel like you contributed to the problem, you played a piece in it. And that's a part of the social emotional learning that we're trying to get them to see. We really want to have a discussion about the things you can control.
I just need to catch myself and know my surroundings.
It is a place for students to process their role in it, understanding who was harmed, but then also understanding that it's okay to reflect on what you as a student needed in that situation.
I don't need anything from others to make it right because I can be mature on my own.
But how can we help you in the maturing process? Because we're going to be here too. What I usually say is I don't want to change your behavior. I want you to think about it before you do it. Really, I've seen them becoming very intentional about what they do, what they say.
Everybody has to own up to their consequences.
And that's the whole purpose of the zone.
By me owning it, it's going to help me better.
Thank you. When I was listening to that just now, I was thinking about a class that I was in yesterday, a first grade class, and I had problems with the projector. And I said to the students, I have a problem. I made a mistake. And they said to me, that means you were really trying. And I thought, wow, this class is really in tune with the fact that making a mistake is not a bad thing. It's an opportunity to learn. So I was really, really excited about that. Next slide, please. So now it's time for questions and answers. What questions do you have? Or is there something you'd like me to talk more about?
So Raymond, yes, we do have a question. This is from Aubrey Fields. Can the teacher have the zone in the classroom, or can the homeroom become the zone?
I'm sorry, can the zone meaning, so like a safe zone with the circles?
Yes, I'm assuming that that's what she's talking.
And when you say the homeroom, I'm assuming you mean the house?
No, I took it as, and then maybe Aubrey can clarify. I took it as when she's talking about the teacher, maybe she's talking about in an elementary setting, and then when she's talking about homeroom, maybe that might be in a secondary setting.
Okay, well, let's address all of it. Yes, yes, yes. I think that circles can be run anywhere, and a safe zone can be run anywhere. All it really means is that you're, again, sitting down, focused on one person talking at a time. One of the slides that for some reason wasn't there is that during circles, there's what's called a talking stick, and each person has an opportunity to talk. And when they have the talking stick, everybody else's job is to be listening. So that can take place in an elementary classroom. It can take place in a homeroom in secondary, and it certainly can take place at home, whether that's between two people or a whole family. That's a fabulous question. Are there other questions, Alex?
Let me see. No, at this time, I do not see any additional questions, but there is a comment that I would like everyone to know. Raymond, hold on.
Alex, may I ask a question that it's here?
Go ahead, Vilma. I have background noise.
Okay, so this is, hi, is this Tech Talk specifically for a certain school, or is this for all LAUSD schools? So basically, does restorative justice practices happen in just some schools, or is this an LAUSD program for all schools?
So these are LAUSD programs for all schools, but that doesn't necessarily mean that all schools are using it. I encourage you to talk to the teachers and principals at your school and ask them about restorative practices or social emotional learning, and that you heard about it and you're interested in learning more about what they're doing at that school. My position as the Systems of Support Advisor for Historic Central Avenue is to work with different schools to try to implement these programs. There's other people in my position, and there are specific people who just do restorative justice or restorative practices. So there are many resources to help the schools. So I encourage you to get involved at your school and ask them, again, what are they doing? Have they heard of it? And they may not have, or maybe you can encourage them to do it. And if there's anything I can do, my email is there too. So I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you.
We have a comment from Leticia. She just says, thank you very much for the information. We as parents need tips on how to improve the communication with our children or with our kids. So thank you very much for that comment.
Oh, we all need that. And, you know, as a parent, my advice is to listen and listen and listen and wait until your child is done talking and then ask them if they would like any comments or feedback. And I got to tell you, I do the same thing. My wife and I do that together. Sometimes I need to tell her something, and after I'm done, she'll say, well, do you want my opinion, or did you just want to share that? So being respectful of them. Our children are 22 and 26, and we still talk to them all the time. Our daughter calls my wife every day after work to tell her about her day. And that didn't happen by accident. It happened by listening non-judgmentally, asking questions non-judgmentally, and giving them the opportunity to have their independence, which I know is a scary thing sometimes, but that's how they grow. And then they know that we're there for them.
We had a comment about the links. I just wanted to let everyone know that in addition to me dropping the links throughout the presentation, there is a resource slide at the end of our presentation that will be able to see and take a screenshot of that has all the links that I provided throughout the presentation.
Are there any more questions, comments, or things you'd like me to talk more about?
We just have another person saying thank you for these resources. Parents need to use them, and they can work in tandem to help utilize these resources with the school. So things can school and using them better.
You're very welcome. I've been a teacher in LA Unified for 34 years. This is what I truly believe in. I believe in open communication. I believe in safe environments for our students so they can learn. And I really appreciate those comments because this is my life's work.
We have another question that says how to change a person when they grow up in a different culture when where a parent never talked, where the parents never talk to the child.
That's a really good question. And to be honest, I think that's probably a question beyond my capacity to answer, but I will do my best. And that my thoughts are just to ask the person questions, to ask the child, or it sounds like an adult, to ask them questions and ask them, even asking them, how does it feel when I ask you about your day? Because I can tell you that sometimes people feel that questions are intrusive if they're in a situation where they weren't used to talking. So they might feel that it's invading their space. So I would suggest going easy. But the other thing is that by asking questions, we give opportunities. Sometimes people are afraid to ask questions because they think, like, for instance, if there's a death in the family, sometimes people are afraid to ask, how do you feel? Because they're afraid that that will bring up emotions and feelings. But the reality is that the emotions and feelings are already there. The questions are just giving the person an opportunity to share those feelings, to share those emotions, so that they can feel more connected to you. So I don't know if I answered the question, but I hope that helps a little bit. And please ask again if there's clarification needed.
So Raymond, one thing that another participant, another person for the audience said is doing that, asking those questions will help break the cycle, allowing the parent and the child the opportunity to eventually or finally talk.
Yeah, I agree with that. The cycle, that's a huge thing. And I could spend a lot of time, for instance, talking about trauma and the different types of trauma that we have, because often trauma is a cycle. It gets passed on from adults to children. And we do want to break that cycle if it's of trauma or a cycle of not being heard or not being used to talking and sharing feelings. And, you know, again, just being as open as you can with your children or with whoever the person is you're talking to, and sharing your feelings also can give them an opportunity to share. And being vulnerable, which is a hard thing to do, but it sometimes really will open up other people.
Vilma, can you help me out with the question from Norman Galvez?
It's more like a comment. She's indicating how they always ask their child how they are feeling and what if there's something that is bothering them or concerns of concern, and then they make them feel better, giving them allowing them to trust them or giving them the trust to have a good communication. So that's more like a comment about good communication, asking those questions and keeping the lines of communication open.
Oh, that's so wonderful. I'm very happy for your child.
Thank you, Vilma.
One comment, wonderful comment, it's about the parent who is looking out for the well-being of of her children, and she tries to get involved with all the information, get all the information that schools provide. So thank you for that, Señora Consuelo Perez.
We have another question that says, what do we do with children if they are very negative?
Again, that might need more attention than a better answer than I'm able to give. Again, just so you know, my background, I am a teacher. I've dealt with a lot of social emotional issues and mental health issues throughout my career, but I'm not a psychiatric social worker. Now, at our schools, we do have psychiatric social workers who can sometimes help and provide counseling and things of that nature. But going back to what I was saying before, if they're very negative, I might just ask them, you know, why do they feel that way? Or is there another way of seeing it? Is there another possibility? And by asking questions, I don't think you're going to get immediate results. I think it's a process that takes time, but maybe always just trying to remind them of the positive. But I would still validate how they feel, the negative part that they feel. I hear you're saying this, and I understand that. You know, I was wondering, could it also be seen this way? What do you think? And just asking questions help guide them. Again, I really wish we were doing this in person so we could have more of a dialogue and I could hear more from you, you know, more follow-up questions and if that helped or didn't help. So I'm sorry about this limitation of Zoom.
So a follow-up question, I guess you somewhat answered it already, is in case they need help, who should they ask for help at the schools that I assume?
Yeah, so at our schools, first of all, you could start with the teacher, the principal, and they should be able to give you ideas of resources. Our school nurses are a wonderful resource, certainly for health things, and also possibly social, emotional, mental health things. Many of our schools have psychiatric social workers who are trained therapists. Many of our schools have school psychologists who deal specifically with students with IEPs. So there are a lot of different resources. And then often there's resources outside the school, but you would have to talk to those people at the school for those specific resources.
Thank you for that. And just reminding parents and families that we are a resource for you too, right? The Parent and Family Engagement Unit. Please reach out to us. We can point you in the right direction should we not have the answer for you. So again, we have various services in our local district for parents and families. So reach out, please. That's the first step. Reach out and contact us.
Yeah, I see somebody also commented that they have their child is negative, and somebody else also said that their son has a book called Anxiety Sucks, and that's helped him understand anxiety and how to handle it. And I'm not familiar with that book, but I'm going to look into that. There's certainly a lot of self-help books, if you want to call them that, or whatever you'd like to call them, that help people better understand how to deal with things like anxiety. There are apps available also to help people with mindfulness. And again, mindfulness is just a way of slowing down and helping yourself see things in a different way, a calmer way. One of the things that I didn't read on the slide about mindfulness was a quote that I really love, which is that when you're practicing mindfulness, you have thoughts going through your mind, and that's okay. You want to just be aware of them. You don't want to try to block them out, because blocking them out sometimes makes them stronger. And also, you don't want to chase them, because sometimes if you follow them, all of a sudden you get into all kinds of anxiety and worry. And I know that that's not easy to do. It happens to me all the time, and I have to use my mindfulness and think about, why am I thinking these thoughts? And do I want to follow that thought? Is that a negative thought? Or can I just let that one go by? But that sounds like a really interesting book.
Raymond, I would like to
yes.
take time to say thank you very much for all the wonderful information that you have provided us today. I think our parents and our families were able to really take this in. And I would actually like to invite you back later on in the semester to do another presentation for our families.
Well, thank you, Alex. That would be wonderful. And I also see that Vilma wrote in there and reminding all of us that in any kind of life-threatening emergencies, there's 911 available, you know, and there are all kinds of resources available for serious emergencies, and please remember to access those.
And I would now like to turn the audience's attention to this slide. And I'll say, parents, these are the resources that were offered throughout the presentation. Please take a screenshot of this slide so you will be able to access the resources at a later date if you are unable to get them during the presentation.
And I'd just like to say thank you again. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with all of you. And I wish you well through this year. We will all keep working together. You have great resources here at our school district. So please, you know, reach out to us when you need to.
Next slide, please. Now, parents, I would like to offer everybody, in addition to Mr. Cole's support, to let you know that the Parent and Community Engagement staff is available to you. We have our supervisor, Ms. Teresa Arguin, our community rep, Norma Gutierrez, and So No, as well as your parent educator coaches. On the slide, you'll see the different emails for each of the parent educator coaches. Like my colleague, Ms. Monton spoke on earlier, please reach out to us. We're available to support and help you out. The first step is to try to contact us. So feel free to do that. Again, this is another slide that you can take a screenshot of so you have our information and you can contact us at a later date. We're here to help. Before we conclude our presentation today, I would like to say again, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us for Tech Talks and More. We're doing Tech Talks every Wednesday, and we will see you back here next Wednesday. Before we end, Raymond, would you like to say anything to the audience?
No, just thank you, and thank you for being there for your children. It means a lot to me as a teacher, and I'm sure to all of your children's teachers. And, you know, during the pandemic and Zoom, all of you have been such a huge support to us, and I'm really grateful. So thank you.
Thanks again, everyone. We're really grateful that you came out today and support our Tech Talks, and we'll see you next week.